Hello. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Stacy.
It's so good to see you.
It's so great. Thank you for inviting me on here.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, welcome everyone. This is my December Doing It series where I celebrate the corporate badasses that have been on the executive path with me for over a year and who are really just changing their organizations from the C suite out. And I just wanted to celebrate them this month and really learn from their words of wisdom and what they do as a leader. And if you're here joining us live, feel free to ask questions and we'll be answering them on today's broadcast. And then we can also go back afterwards if you watch the replay, and we're happy to answer any of those. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being here.
Yeah, thank you again. And Stacy, I feel so honored to be here, but also equally fortunate to actually, come across your podcast. And so that's how I, reach out to you.
Oh, back in the day, huh?
Yes, back in the day.
Oh, I love it. I feel like it was this time last year when we probably met, right? Because you ended up joining executive ahead of time in January-ish or something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. I think I reached out to you, and then I think I told you that I felt like I'm meeting a celebrity because I was listening to your podcast for a while.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Well, one thing I really notice is that when people are listening to my podcast or now reading my book that just came out, that they have a step ahead, right? Because we can just hit the ground running and get to work. But another thing that I want to point out as we get into what we're going to share about today is you if for those of you who are familiar with my work, I coach women to get promoted into higher level executive positions. And what I find is that once women have that clarity of their career path and they really understand where they're headed and the impact that they want to be making, then they can think about other things that they want to do to really impact their organizations at an even higher level. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today in the Doing It series. Um, so, Michelle, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself and then we'll dive into a couple questions.
All right, sure. So my name is Michelle Wee. I'm a fun-loving and creative leader. So currently, I am an R&D director leading a front-end innovation product team of a CPG company. So my job actually allows me to use both of my creative and then strategic thinking skills. So, and I love it. So this is really like what you say, putting your vision into action.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's so fun. Well, you already kind of spoke to it a little bit, but how would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, so Stacey, we were talking about, I was reaching out to you about, this time last year. And I think the first thing I said to you is, I want to advance my career, but then I also don't want to change who I am. So I would say that my leadership style is authenticity. And it is really important to me because I like to connect with people and I like to, talk to people randomly sometimes, just, know where the people is coming from. So I think being who you are, you also bring that uniqueness and you also bring the genuinity when you are connecting with the people in the conversation.
Oh, yeah. I just had this memory back at when we first started working together and we did the Myers-Briggs assessment. And Michelle and I are the exact same type, personality type, and so we're both very driven by the same thing, which is bringing our whole self to work is a really big deal. So I appreciate you sharing that idea of authenticity. So what does it look like practically speaking? How do you actually show up authentically?
Yeah, so this is something that, I've been embracing, but not like, all the time. When I first started my, like my earlier the day of my career, I always think that, now I'm working, I need to act, like certain way. But then as I was meeting a senior executive at the company, and then he was talking about authentic leadership, and I think that's when a light bulb moment came on for me because he's always a person that is very approachable, and he doesn't necessarily act friendly. And then he talked about that, he is trying to be himself at work and outside of work. So really, that moment is really inspired me to, really bring my whole self to work, and then also bring that unique thinking that I have to the table too at work. So it's really diversified the thinking process at work.
I see. So what you're saying is like I can enjoy work more and be happier at work because I feel like I'm not afraid. I don't have to try and pretend to be somebody else,
Mhm.
but you can also, you're bringing your diverse opinions as well. So they're not always happy. It doesn't sound like you're always inclined to agree with everybody in the room, right? But if you feel welcomed and you feel like you can be authentic,
Yep.
then you can bring your whole self.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure that I'm able to voice my opinion. It might be different than
Mhm.
other people, but who knows, that could spark some ideas for the conversation.
Did you have to train anyone around you to see you as more authentically? Like, did you have to, was there anything that you had to do along the way that you felt like, that allowed you to be able to create this? Because not everybody feels like they can be themselves at work. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I think for, I guess, like my team or even like my peers that I work with, right? So I try to you know connect with them genuinely in a way that we can create that trust. So I think my rule number one is, if I meet a new team members or meet a new person, I don't jump into talk about business right away.
Oh, yeah.
I try to use the time to really, for us to get to know each other, because I think that's the key for relationship building down the road, right? We will have to work together, and that
Mhm.
kind of create like a trusting environment for us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're leading by example, but then you're also opening the door for them to be authentic as well.
Hmm.
Awesome. I love that. And when we think about scaling ourselves to the C suite and as you continue to grow in your career, that's the type of leadership that I want to keep bringing with me as I get higher and higher and higher. So it's perfect. I love it.
Right. Like I say,
So,
that's a lot of inspiring leaders that is also, kind of doing that way too. So I
mhm,
want to say that it's getting more important for, any of
mhm.
the organizations.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's actually a thing that if leaders don't just naturally understand how to show up authentically, that it's a skill, right? And sounds like with your mentor in the past that perhaps because I think you said that he showed you that the authentic leadership was a thing, right? That you could actually do, right?
Hmm. And you don't
Yeah.
have to, yeah, you don't have to, really act one way at work and then versus like, outside of work. So like
Yeah.
that's just be your whole self, and then you are like bringing the happiness in your life.
Hmm. I love it. And so, speaking of inspiring your team through, being a role model, what are some ways that you work with your team in order to keep them motivated and inspire them to grow?
Yes. So with that trust building, that's very important to me and for my team. So I think in the way I'm creating kind of safe space for them for the conversation. So we can go through like discussion either for like career or like to project difficulty. So that's something that I trying to provide coaching for the team, but through the
Mm,
conversation too, because of the genuinity, it's kind of create a empowerment for the team, so they know that I trust them to carry out their work, and they
hmm.
know that if they are run into challenges, I will be there to help them. So with that, I think it's really inspiring them to like for them to show up the best and do their best work.
I want to work for you. That sounds great. Come on. That's amazing. I love it so much. It's really, really great. And in terms of being able to do that, so you talked about having meetings where it's very open door, like we don't always talk about work and always get right into the projects we're working. Is there any other tools that you use to bring out, like to allow them to feel safe and be able to be open?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, rule number one is really trying to get to know, the person. But second thing is you also want to follow through with some of the conversation. So if I had a, career development conversation with a team member, I want to make sure that, the team member is it's also taking accountable to carry out
Mhm.
the steps. And then we have like follow-up meeting for the discussion, as simple as, hey, so how is it going with what we talked about before? What else you realize? And oftentimes, I found that the team member will actually come back and talk about, I thought more about what we said before and hears, what I'm thinking. So usually is actually helping them to build on some of the thinking and finding more clarity on what they want to do.
Awesome. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. And that idea of follow through, it doesn't go without saying, like, we all have the leaders that don't follow up. And especially when it comes to career development, I feel like it's like you have that one really great conversation with your boss and they make all these promises, or at least they allude to some promises, and then it's never brought up again. Right. And so I appreciate that a lot. I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's tied to like, the type of work that I do, because empathy is very important. So I think with that, just thinking about like, when I was in their, process, right? I would love that, I can bring back the reflection to the manager that I have the discussion with, right? And then continue to get the input. So I think that is an area that we want to make sure the team member, feel that way. Sometimes they might not be ready. And I want to say that we all are busy. So it has to be really mindful to put on the calendar, right? All right.
Yes.
3 months from now, we're going to have a follow-up discussion.
Yeah, because otherwise, like I love what you said. Sometimes they're not ready and you don't want to catch them off guard as well. Like you want to let them be mindful of their, what they're thinking through and give them some space. But I'm really curious about what you just said, where you said in my work, empathy is very important. Can you expand on that a little bit? I'm curious what that means.
Yes. So because I'm working on the front end innovation and with consumer, so I do have to pay a lot of attention of what consumers say. Sometimes you don't get the direct answer, right? So you have to be really, observing, and then really think about like, the like problems that they are sharing. How do we solve them? So you need to use the empathy to really understand, just kind of walk a day in their shoes, and then be able to understand, the challenges that they are facing so that you can create a solution for them.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's so perfect. That has to inform your leadership style as well. Like, I love that. Yeah, that's so cool. So, why do you personally feel like you want to have a voice at the table? Why are you motivated to make a bigger impact at your organization and beyond?
Yeah, so I think I want to make a impact. That's something that I always said. I want to make an impact either, at the organization, at the society. I just want to bring value to the table. So have a seat at the table. I feel like I can use my influence skill and my knowledge, to impact the organizations. Bringing in, the voice of the consumer or the voice of my team member to talk about how can we better, certain situations. So I think that's the idea of why I want to have a seat on the table.
Is so that you can bring more of this collaborative, empathetic leadership, like even the higher you go, and to the organization as a whole, right? Is that, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I love that. And what in terms of like thought leadership and what drives you in like the greater world, maybe even outside of your organization, what motivates you?
Yeah, so I want to say that like I do look at my core values a lot. I think I use that as my guiding compass. I think one of my core value is about happiness. So either happiness, family or overall, at work. I think that is something that kind of really guiding my decision for the motivation for the work, the type of work that I want to do, things like that.
I feel like you have this quality about you that's like measurable happiness, right? Does this resonate at all? I just made that term up for you. But and what I mean by that is something like, you've talked about happiness a couple of times and that being a core value in your leadership style and everything. But I also feel like even in terms of the consumer, that you're able to look and see how this core value of happiness actually relates to, them and helping the consumer as well. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm not sure about like, measurable, but definitely yes, there's something about like bringing happiness like to my own life or like, to other people. And I think that's an area that I also found my friends would reach out to me, like just asking for, advice. And I found that oftentimes I go back to, what is really best for you, what's,
Mhm.
your happiness.
Yeah, that's that empathy. It's so
Mhm.
good. Yeah, yeah, and then we'll figure out ways to measure it later.
Yeah,
I love it. I think
we'll find a way. I'm a scientist, so I can find a way to measure.
oh, yeah, that's true, that's true. You're like, yeah. Yeah, you're like, "Well, we have to there's a whole process to measuring it," but I'm happy to do that. That's awesome. So, what else? Anything else that you wanna add before we go today?
I guess the last thing I want to, encourage people really to understand, what's their core values. Like I mentioned before, using that as your guiding compass. I think sometimes you're faced with like challenges in life that you might be like bogged down with a situation. But if you look at your core values again, and suddenly it will give you some clarity. It might not give you all the answer, but it will give you clarity.
Mhm.
Obviously, I say it, but I sometimes I have lost sight of my own core values. But again, I have to remind myself to look at that and just use that as my guiding compass.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that that is one way that we can kind of measure that we're headed in the right direction, right? So it's like, oh, is, either this new opportunity or how I'm leading my team or the conversations that I'm having or the leader that I'm showing up with, right? Is it aligned with these five core values, right? And maybe it's not all of them all at once, but you
Yep.
can still look at it and then it'll sort of say, something needs to change here, right? It's like, and what can that be? So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and you won't know because the core values in you, and then again because we are ENFP, so the
Mhm.
gut feeling is really strong. Sometimes
It
can.
is, it is. Yeah, you and I are kindred spirits. I love it so much. Michelle, thank you for being here. Please, if you're watching this in the replay, send us some love. Let us know what resonated with you, or like I said, ask questions, anything you want to know more about. Michelle is here to answer them for you. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And congratulations to you, corporate badass, and all of the amazing stuff that you're working on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here chatting with
Thank
you
you.
live. Yeah.